Welcome to the Fantasy Football Sackos podcast with your hosts, Jason Shellcross and Alex Krogh.
Let's go, Fantasy Football Sackos. This is Jason Shellcross. That is Alex Krogh, who is looking more and more like a homeless man at this point. Alex, if I was, we're ranking receivers today, but if I was going to rank your hair, this is looking very COVID-esque right now. How do you feel?
It's fair for long-time listeners. Halloween 2020, I went as Al Davis.
That was still my favorite episode.
And cut my own hair. For those of you who don't know, I started my own company this year, and I'm currently making $0. Or at least it seems like it. So I'm just not. I'm cutting my own hair again actively, and so I was swimming with my daughter and the rest of my family, for that matter. And my kid kept pushing me under the water, and was like, "Your hair's like down to your bottom of your neck, Dad." I was like, "Yeah, it's kind of embarrassing, but here I am." And yeah, you know what? When you throw gel in it, it looks okay. Everybody seems to like the flow, and so I'm just going with it.
It's got a lot of flow to it, I will say. And it looks wonderful. And
you just called me homeless, didn't you? You said
that's where your secret power comes from, Alex. You embrace it.
It's true.
Right, we are ranking our top receivers for 2024 today. Let's just dive in. First up, we're gonna
hold on, just real quick. It should be noted it's August 5th. There's a lot of fluidity in here. Puka Nacua just hurt his knee. He's week to week. We don't know what that means. We have him ranked as if he's healthy because we're assuming he's going to be healthy at the beginning of the year. Check out the Sackos sheet. We're going to release it here in a couple weeks as we get closer. You can go to the fantasyfootballsackos.com. Grab our Sackos sheet. Some call it a sack of shit. We call it the sack of sheet. So grab that.
You're the tequila.
Don't worry about it. We'll have Puka ranked appropriately on
Who's on the mic over there?
But we're assuming he's going to be healthy for the beginning of the season. Also, CeeDee Lamb, who, spoiler alert, number one wide receiver that we have, he is not in camp and is trying to get a new contract. Brandon Ayuk.
Okay, but rather than doing a high-level overview of all of these guys, we can talk about these talking points when these players come up in our rankings, because this is a rankings podcast where we are going to go one by one over each of these players individually.
Okay, Jason.
Because it's a fantasy football rankings podcast.
I'm just trying to give a flair to the listener who might be listening to this at the end of August, early September. They're like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. And they're like, why do they have this guy ranked so high? He tore his ACL. I'm just giving context to it.
You know what else gives context to that? The automated date generation, notifications that a new podcast has been published as of today. And they'll see that the date on the podcast is August 5th or August 6th.
But if they're like, Siri, play the Fantasy Football Sackos podcast, they ain't looking at
They probably wouldn't play one from a month ago. It would probably just play the latest one at that point in time.
Okay. All right, Jason, go ahead. You run. I'm just here. I'll chip in where I feel like it, I guess.
Oh, Alex. Okay, I'm sorry. I feel bad now. All right. First up, consensus number one, CeeDee Lamb. Not in camp, CeeDee Lamb. Doesn't matter.
It doesn't. You spin me right round, baby, right round like a record, baby, except he's a CD. So targets last year, he was the number one wide receiver. He was the number one wide receiver, first in targets with 181. First in catches with 135. Second in yards with 1749. Jason's losing his shit. We're good. He had the third most touchdowns with 12. CeeDee Lamb was really great last year. They still don't really have a running back in Zeke. Dak Prescott, maybe his last year. You look at McCarthy's wide receivers historically, they've been really great. We have him at 1 because he was number 1 last year, but it's not just that. It just kind of makes sense. That's the way their offense works. They feed their number 1 wide receiver, and so that's where CeeDee Lamb is.
There you go. I mean, he was incredible last year. 335 fantasy points, the top wide receiver in half PPR scoring, just shave under 20 points per game, 1,700 yards and 14 touchdowns, as Krog mentioned. The running game gets worse with Tony Pollard going away.
Does it? He wasn't very good last year.
I know he wasn't good, but like the ghost of Zeke Elliott is there. I mean, what are we really talking about?
Who might be a better goal line back than
okay, fine. You picked like the one niche thing, but like between the 20s, that offense is worse. Is it not?
Not marginally, honestly. Like another year, Jake Ferguson, Brandon Cooks is still there. And like they move the ball. McCarthy offenses always move the ball. Like even going back, right? You know, dating myself at least a little bit. Like you think of Greg Jennings, you think of Jordy Nelson, who had 1,300 yards, 1,500 yards, 1,250 in 13, 14, 16. He got hurt in 15. But like that's what McCarthy's offenses do. They give their number 1 wide receiver 1,200, 1,300 plus yards every year. And like Brandon Cooks came on at the end of last year, Zeke is older, but you know, he balled out for the Patriots a little bit at the end of last year, and as Ramondre kind of got hurt. So yeah, I would expect this offense to still be explosive. CeeDee Lamb was 1 last year. He sat out. Tyreek averaged 0.1 points more a game than him. Tyreek sat out a game. So they were basically mano there. Tyreek has more competition for targets, and their backfield is a little bit more explosive than I said Dallas's are. So that's why I'm currently giving the edge to CD. Supposedly CD got a contract last Friday. Hopefully he's showing up. We're assuming he's going to show up. And he also was helped last year by 2 rushing touchdowns. We'll see. They kind of ran like an end around every game for him, which was kind of weird. So they're going to find ways to get this guy the ball, and I would be shocked if he's not a top 5 wide receiver this year.
If CeeDee Lamb is still not in camp when people draft, what would you have them do?
It's a good question. So he's currently going pick 2, basically behind McCaffrey. I don't know. You'll have to talk to me in a month. Obviously, this podcast was posted on April 6th or on August 6th. So I don't know. I don't want to tell you what future Alex is gonna think. No, but
I would draft Tyreek and be fine.
Yeah, that's fair.
And my last question for you, CeeDee Lamb or CMC?
You have to take Christian McCaffrey. It's
okay.
You're talking 1-1. It has to be Christian McCaffrey.
And assuming CeeDee Lamb does sign a new contract, is he your 1-2?
So that's a good question. I don't know if you want to get into this now or if you want to get into it later.
Well, I asked.
The draft is really weird right now. So like if you look at Sleeper, which I somewhat rely on, there's a ton of wide receivers going early. And so basically right now it's Christian McCaffrey, spoiler, and then CeeDee Lamb, 2, 3, 4 wide receivers, a running back, 3 more wide receivers, a running back. So there's going to be like 7 or 8 currently, according to Sleeper, wide receivers in the first round. That's outrageous to me. It's also really important to get a wide receiver because it's harder to find a wide receiver on the waiver wire than it is to find a running back on the waiver wire, because usually a running back gets hurt and it's easier to just get their replacement. If a wide receiver gets hurt, their backup is usually already on a team, so you're not going to go pick up the second wideout and get similar production. So I understand why wide receivers are going early, but they're just going super early. So I like taking a wide receiver just to get one, the way that the drafts are breaking down right now. But yeah, 1-2 for CeeDee Lamb is early. it's really early.
Very early. Next up, consensus number 2, Tyreek Hill. You already talked about him a little bit. I mean, to me, it's really like the first 4 guys, which consensus 3 for us. I mean, there's a lot of chalk in the top 4. Everybody pretty much has the same. But we have Jamar Chase at 3 and Amon-Ra at 4. They're as safe gets. But, I mean, do you have any strong preference between the 4 of them?
So, CeeDee Lamb, his head coach has a record of getting the ball to his best wide receiver. Tyreek Hill, his head coach has a track record of getting their best wide receiver the ball. So you go back in time, Tyreek, the last 5 years, right? So 2018, 1,479 yards. He only played 12 games in 2019. And then since then, 1276, 1239, 1710, and 1799 the last 2 years in Miami. So he's averaged 1,760 yards the last 2 years playing for the Miami Dolphins. He had 13 touchdowns last year, 7 the year before that. This is like an easy, provided he stays healthy. I mean, he's going to be 30 this year. His birthday was in March, so he's 30 now. So, you know, some of these guys have been around for a while, right? Like Tyreek Hill's getting older. He has a ton of mileage, fast as hell. But some of these guys we're going to talk about are going to get a little bit older, and that's more towards the bottom here. But I feel like Tyreek might be the safest pick, unless Tua gets hurt, which we talked about last year, which is why we had Tyreek lower.
But it didn't happen.
So
he finishes wide receiver 2.
Yeah, right. And Tua got his big contract. Dak doesn't have his big contract. So I think that's why I favor CeeDee Lamb, because his quarterback's going to try to ball out, get a $60 million contract. Tua's locked in for $50 million for the next 4 years. So
Tyreek Hill, first in target share, almost a third of passes went to Tyreek Hill last year. Second in air yard share at 42%, and first in yards per route run at more than 4. And he was also first in first downs per route run.
Third in targets, tied for second in receptions, first in yards, tied for first with touchdowns. Like, all the stats are there. He's going pick 3 or 4.
Yeah. Yep. Solid. Super solid. Next up, Jamar Chase, wide receiver 3 consensus. I mean, last year, I don't know. For me, it's sort of just a throwaway with what happened to Burrow. Like, he came out of the gate, and then he came out of the gate kind of hobbled, and then had the shoulder sprain thing with the wrist thing. In weeks 1 to 4, I mean, Chase was wide receiver 23, had a 27% target share, almost a 35% air yard share, 36% first read share. So, I mean, he was there. Granted, he wasn't healthy. When weeks 5 through 10, when Burrow was feeling better, Chase was wide receiver 4, almost a 30% target share. So he was there. I think he's a top 4 wideout. He's healthy. Burrow's healthy. That's what matters.
Yeah, T. Higgins might be his last year there. Franchise tag.
He can't stay healthy anyway.
No, I agree. I mean, Higgins was interesting last year, right? Half PPR scoring here. Going down the list. 6.6, 5.6, 20.1, 10.8, 44, 11, 20.26, 21, 8, 10, 26. Like, very sporadic. He can win you a week. He can maybe cost you a week. There's weeks where he had 15 targets, 19, 13, 12, 12. But then, like, at the end of the season, 4, 4, 7, 6, but he's dealing with the backup quarterback, so Joey B, the newly blondly minted Joey B, is going to get him the ball. He played 16 games last year, 11th in targets, 10th in receptions, 12th in yards, 7 touchdowns, which is tied for 17th. It just kind of feels like a bounce back here, doesn't it? Like, I originally had Amon-Ra St. Brown over him, and the more I kind of thought about it, it just feels like Burrow's going to have something to prove, and it seems like Chase does too. And so I bumped him up. He's currently going as pick number 5 on Sleeper. ESPN has him ranked as their 3rd wide receiver. We do too. Fantasy Pros has him at 4. They have Amon-Ra over him. So, he's really good. He's a great wide receiver. You kind of have to deal with the weather at least a little bit when it comes to Cincinnati. So, like, that's like the only real downside there, I guess. You know, when the weather starts getting bad in December, home against the Steelers, at the Cowboys, at the Titans, home against the Browns. Like, it's not great weather, but
yeah. No, who doesn't have to worry about weather? Amon-Ra St. Brown and the Detroit Lions, because they play in a dome. Amon-Ra St. Brown, man, was he consistent last year? 1,500 receiving yards, 3rd most red zone targets, and receiving touchdowns with 10, which was 5th best. The guy just crushed it. He was 4th in first downs per route run, 7th in yards per route run. I mean, he's the reason why I am happy with a top 7 pick. I would love pick number 7 in drafts, because then I can get any one of the 4 wide receivers that we just talked about, Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, or Bijan Robinson. Give me any one of those 7 dudes. Give me pick 7. I'll take whichever one is there, and then I get the first guy coming back in round 2. So I like Amon-Ra. I did watch also the Netflix receiver series, which showed that this guy is just an absolute freaking beast. Had an oblique injury, basically almost tore it off the freaking bone, and the guy is just playing through it. Had hand, foot, and mouth, played through it. Couldn't feel his hand or his feet, and said it was like running on open sores that just wore themselves open. Now, the guy plays through everything. He's so tough. He's a great receiver. They do have Jameson Williams now in year 2, who's been impressing in camp. I don't know. I'm not as concerned. He's more of a burner type. Amon-Ra's the guy. So, do you have any thoughts on Amon-Ra?
I do. He's really great. I with the way that things are kind of working out. So Jameson Williams actually is in year 3 because he was suspended at the first year. And
was it? I don't think he was suspended. Was it suspended? I think he tore his ACL.
Oh yeah. He was coming back, and then he got suspended. So for me, fantasy football is a young person's game. Like I feel like I get away from it a little bit, even though we have some older guys ranked later here. So Amon-Ra's gonna be 25. He was dealing with all the injury stuff last year. Still put together 5th most targets, 2nd most receptions, 3rd most yards, and 10 touchdowns, which is tied for 4th. So the difficulty in this is we have Laporta as the number 1 tight end. Gibbs is going to be ranked high. Montgomery is going to vulture some touchdowns. Jameson Williams is emerging. There's a ton of people here. For that reason, I have Goff ranked relatively high in my quarterback rankings, just because these dudes are going to score some points. It's one of those things where he's their biggest mouth to feed, unless they're going to continue to feature Gibbs more in the passing game. I don't know how the touchdowns get gets split between them. So if he gets dropped down to like 5 or 6 touchdowns, which is entirely possible, he's still going to have 13, 14, 1,500 yards like he did last year. Like, he had the 5th most targets, he had the 2nd most catches, so he feels like a safe pick. And back to your point of, hey, if I can get Bijan, if I can get Breece, if I can get Amon-Ra, if I can get Chase, like, top 7 seems like safe and guys that you want.
Yeah, I will say, and the only thing that gives me a little bit of pause is the Detroit Lions playoff schedule this year. The Bills, the Bears, and the Niners. Back to back to back. Not super delicious, but one of those is at home.
Sorry, yeah, I was say, where are those games?
Home against the Bills, at Chicago, at San Fran.
Yeah, and the Bears seem to own Jared Goff for whatever reason. I think the jury's still out on the Bears' defense, but the Bills are more than happy to play a high-scoring game, and the 49ers are just going to beat the crap out of you. So, yeah, currently going pick 7 or 8 is Amon-Ra St. Brown. So again, these wide receivers are going real early, whereas in past years, hey, wide receiver 4, you're getting him at the end of round 1, early round 2. Nope. He's going like middle of round 1.
Yep. Somebody that might be there towards the end of round 1 is our consensus wide receiver 5, Justin Jefferson. I mean, this is low for Jay Jets, but he did finish as wide receiver 29 last year. I mean, he had the hamstring injury that it felt like he never came back from. There were questions of if he was coming back at all at certain points. Still somehow found a way to finish with over 1,000 yards. Honestly, I'm really surprised by that number was actually achieved. Had 100 targets on the season, 68 catches, 5 scores. I mean, the fall in this ranking is really just because of one guy, and it's not him. It's you mentioned it before. It's the quarterback position. It's Kirk Cousins going down to Atlanta, and now we have Sam Darnold propping up Jay Jettas. How do you feel about the Vikings offense this year without Kirk Cousins?
It can't possibly be what it was in the past with Kirk, but you trust their head coach off the Sean McVay coaching tree. Jefferson's going pick 4. So people are fine with him, at least on Sleepers going pick 4. ESPN has him ranked as their 5th wide receiver, so does Fantasy Pros. Last year was the first time he was really injured. He missed a couple games as a rook. He did not. He played in all of them as a rookie. But last year was the first time he missed any significant time. People are kind of forgetting what he did in 2021. In 2022, he had 108 catches for 1,600 yards in 2021. He had 128 catches for 1,800 yards in 2022. He only played in 10 games last year, and he had 100 targets. And that includes the game that he got hurt. So, like, does it even matter who their quarterback is? They're going to figure out a way to give him the ball. I mean, maybe Aaron Jones hurts him a little bit, but, I mean, dude's still really good. I'm fine with taking him more in the back half of round 1 than I am at the front half of round 1. Like, there are running backs that I would rather have that we've previously mentioned. But, I mean, Justin Jefferson's a great wide receiver. He just is great. So I almost feel like you're getting him a little bit of a discount at 5, but he might have a rookie quarterback throwing to him, and what are we doing here, right? So McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, or are you going Bijan or Breece Hall? Like, Gibbs is currently going pick 10. Like, I'm going to take Jefferson over Gibbs, but as we've already talked about, we would take 4 wide receivers before we took Jefferson, and Jefferson's going real early at pick 4 with a lot of uncertainty at quarterback.
Yeah, I mean that's truly what it is. He's going to be solid. It's sad. It's sad to see what happens when you take like a top 15 quarterback away from an incredible wide receiver. He was averaging about 3 points or 4 points per game more with Kirk Cousins under helm than the rest of the QBs driving that ship last year. So,
yeah, and there's also reports from camp, right? He's trying to be careful with the hamstring, and that's concerning. It's like that hamstring pull was 10 months ago, so like the fact that he like it's still like in the back of his head makes me a little bit nervous, but like, hey, if you're getting him as the 5th wide receiver, that's very different than getting him as the 2nd wide receiver. So there are guys we prefer. He's a great wide receiver. You're kind of nitpicking things at this point. I would not take him at pick 4, but if he's going like 8, 9, sure.
There you go. All right, next up for us, consensus, wide receiver 6, A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown last season finished as wide receiver 7. So, hey, yo, got him going up a slot there. 106 catches, almost 1,500 yards, and 7 scores. I mean, it was fantastic. Almost 160 targets. I don't know. Some people were kind of thinking maybe there'd be a little bit of fall off with Devonta Smith in year 2. Didn't really happen at all. I'm not thinking it's going to happen this year either with Devonta Smith. Another year in, A.J. Brown is just too damn good. Saquon, I think, makes the ground game much more effective, but I don't think that they ever truly like lean on it in a way that, A.J. Brown isn't still going to get his. So, are you concerned at all about A.J. Brown this season?
No, I mean, he's like this generation's Julio Jones, at least a little bit, right? Where you're just like, he's going to lock in the 100 catches, 1,200 yards, questions the touchdowns. When he was with the Titans, the question was always, he doesn't get enough targets. He had 158 of them last year. So that's not the question when it comes to A.J. Brown. 8th most targets, 7th most catches, 5th in yards, tied for 17th in touchdowns with 7. So, yeah, this is a question of we don't know what their offense is going to look like. We're assuming there's going to be less tush pushes because of Kelsey. We're also assuming they're going to turn around and give the ball to Saquon more.
It's going to look a hell of a lot better because it got super predictable in the second half of last year, and then they added Kellen Moore as the signal caller. So, like, it's going to be better, right? And he was already doing 1,500 yards.
Yeah, and Kellen Moore, supported CeeDee Lamb in the past. He supported Keenan Allen last year, who points per game was like top 5 before he got hurt. So, like, hey, if they're going to feature A.J. Brown, of course, I'm in. He's also on the younger side. He's still only 27. He's been in the league for 5 years. Signed a couple big contracts. So, yeah, I mean, he's going pick 8. Towards the end of round 1. ESPN has him at 6. Fantasy Pros has him at 7. We have him at 6. You could do worse. I will say this. If you think back to last year, or I guess any year, really, when you're going up against A.J. Brown in prime time, it sucks. Like that should be like one of the measures of like, should I draft this person? And it's, do I want to draft him or do I want to go up against him? Because going up against him in like when you're trying to hang on to like a 15-point lead or something like that, and AJ Brown's going for the other person, and he's getting targets of 10, 14, 13, 15, 13, 13, 10, and 11. I'm cherry picking some games there, but like he's getting all these targets, and in those like he had a couple games where he had double-digit targets, and he's still only scoring in the low 10s. Like there is massive blow-up potential for him. And so, yeah, he's a guy that I would rather be on my team than me facing him.
Eagles playoff schedule: home against the Steelers, at the Commanders, home against the Boys. Not too shabby.
You could do worse.
Especially if you... Yeah, if you get by the Steelers, it's really not bad. They're out. Next up, we have consensus wide receiver. Alex, what number are we on? 7, Puka Nacua. Alex talked about how shallow the waiver wire can be for receivers. Puka Nacua was that guy last season. I mean, I don't even remember how much fab I put on him after week 1. I think it was like it was like a lot. 40. It was so much. But even after Cooper Kupp did return last year, Puka led the duo in target share with more than 25%, air yards share 32%, yards per route run at more than 2.5, and fantasy points per game, finishing as wide receiver 12. Oh my God, Cooper Kupp's going to come back and Puka's going to fall off. When they were together, he was still wide receiver 12. So the guy can do it regardless of whether or not Cooper Kupp is on the field with him. 105 catches, almost 1,500 yards, and 6 scores. Would have loved to see him fall into the end zone another couple times, but just incredibly reliable. I mean, he was the Matt Stafford outlet guy, making every difficult contested catch, sideline catch, anything that you can think of. Puka was the guy last year, so he looked incredible. He looked like a younger version of Cooper Kupp, like in some ways, but it was really fun to see. Are you excited? Do you think Puka's able to parlay it into year 2 here?
Maybe. Here's the thing. You did not want to see Puka score more touchdowns because you had Kyren on your team, and so you were just fine with the way things were working out for the Rams last year. So
I had him on other teams where I didn't have Kyren.
No, I understand. I just don't want the listener to feel too bad. So Puka started out the year like a house on fire, right? His first week he had 15 targets. Week 2 against San Francisco, he had 20 targets.
Yeah. So I think he set a rookie record.
7, 10, 11, 7, 12, 7, 7. Then there was a bye week. 7, 8, 7, 9, 8, 11, 8, 6. So he wasn't really eclipsing that double-digit mark all that much in the second half of the year, but he was still like remarkably consistent and very good. I mean, there's so many of these guys that I'm really conflicted on because I like them. I like the value that they had last year, and so trying to like reset it for this year, I'm having at least a little bit of trouble. He's currently going pick 11 or 12, so end of round 1, early round 2.
That's bananas.
It's just really early. It's just really early. I don't know what else to say. I mean, he was wide receiver 4 last year. He was great. Like I get all of it. 6th in targets, 8th in catches, 4th in yards.
Man, receivers are going early this year.
I mean, Cooper Kupp is still there. So what if
receivers are just going early?
What if Cooper Kupp returns to form? Now Puka's got this week-to-week knee injury. He's got week-to-week and weak knees. Like, that's not a good that's triple week. Sorry. I just don't know what to do with this. His ADP is obviously going to fall. I would believe it's probably going to fall to the middle of round 2, end of round 2. Now that he's hurt, he's young. He was great last year. It's just too early to take Puka Nacua. I don't care. Like, it's just too early.
Yeah, but that's more about the overall position though, because he's still your wide receiver 7. You're just saying you wish that there wasn't 7 receivers going that early. That's more of an indictment on the overall wide receiver position than it is on Puka Nacua.
That's fair. I would like to take my 7th wide receiver off the board like at the end of round 2 or the middle of round 2, and that's just currently not happening. And so, hey, if you like, everybody has a price. If you have to pay it, like, I guess you do it. But man, you're staring down the barrel at Puka Nacua at pick 11 or 12, and the same guys on the board are Jahmyr Gibbs, Garrett Wilson, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon, Kyren, Etienne. gonna be hard to invest in Puka Nacua at that price.
Give me Kyren and Kelsey at the turn, Give me a little bit of that action, no?
Kelsey's that's too early for Kelsey, but I understand what you're saying.
Give me something. All right. That does it for Puka. We are going to transition to wide receiver 8 consensus. Garrett Wilson. Your guy. You could not have loved him more last year. I tried to find a way to love him more than you, and I couldn't do it. You ended up with him on your team in our league, and you suffered through watching the once highly touted Garrett Wilson finish as the wide receiver 32 is now consensus wide receiver 8 for some reason. Why don't you tell the folks why?
All right, so last year I'm sitting at the draft. Done a couple drafts before that. I had already taken CeeDee Lamb over Garrett Wilson in a league. And Jason might not remember this because he might have been 10 beers deep in the first round already. But I said, I already have CeeDee Lamb. I'd like to diversify, and I took Garrett Wilson. I think Garrett Wilson
feels bad, man.
I think Garrett Wilson was probably the most disappointing person last year in fantasy, with maybe like Tony Pollard as like a close second. Alexander Madison was pretty disappointing for us. So it's really hard to get back on the bandwagon again here for Garrett Wilson. But 4th most targets, 13th most catches. He only had 3 touchdowns. Pathetic offense. I mean, this is an Aaron Rodgers bet, right? Like, full stop. 32 last year. We have him at 8. He's going pick 12, 13. Basically where he was going last year. He's a great wide receiver. He just didn't have a quarterback to throw him. And I think that's where where wide receivers are tough, because you need a healthy quarterback and a healthy wide receiver. If the quarterback goes down, some of these guys' values plummet. So, I mean, Aaron Rodgers is old.
Yeah.
He's coming off of a torn Achilles, allegedly, even though he's going to try to play last year. No, whatever. So this is a get good, right? Like, hey, you owe me this. And so you just take him again. Dude's really great at football. He's a great wide receiver. The fact that he was only able to catch like 60% of his passes is not because he couldn't catch them. It's because they weren't where he could catch them. Because if they were, he probably would have caught them.
Aaron Rodgers is 40 years old. He's going to be 41 this year. During the season, he will turn 41. My question to you is, last season, they lost Aaron Rodgers on like the 4th play of the year and did not really have an answer at the quarterback position for the remainder. This year, yes, Aaron Rodgers is coming back. Do you think that they address the backup quarterback position with Tyrod Taylor?
I was going to say, who doesn't love some Tyrod other than the Chargers doctor from like 5 years ago?
That's deflating.
His lungs are the footballs.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I guess.
Do you think Tyrod can prop up a wide receiver 1?
Sure.
I mean, do you love it? No, but like, hey, you just Garrett
hope Aaron
Wilson for me.
Just hope Aaron Rodgers
it's weird
stays
because
healthy.
it's like Garrett Wilson for me is almost a stay away, because I just don't believe that 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers is going to stay healthy.
Come on, Tom Brady did it until he was 45.
Okay, all right, fine, maybe. I mean, Wilson was 9th in target share at 27%, 1st in air yard share, 5th in first read share. It was just the quarterback play. The Jets were 30th in adjusted completion rate and 27th in catchable target rate.
That's not good.
It was trash. It was hot trash.
And for what it's worth, the Jets did bring back Nathaniel Hackett as their offensive coordinator. who was a disastrous Broncos coach 2 years ago, but he bends the knee to Rodgers, who will be calling the offense on the field most of the year this year, provided he stays on the field. So, yeah, I mean, I would not be afraid to pull the trigger on Garrett Wilson if you pulled it on him last year, because you're like, man, I just want to see him do his thing.
Jets playoff schedule, not intimidating at all. At the Jaguars, home against the Rams, Aaron Donald-less Rams. And at the Bills for championship week. So unless there's some weather there, really not a bad playoff schedule.
Yeah, you could do a lot worse.
All right, next up, consensus. Wide receiver 9, Mike Evans. Finished last year as wide receiver 5. I mean, you slept on him. I slept on him. We slept on him. Pretty much everyone did. Everyone, I think, was a little unsure, whether or not Baker Mayfield was gonna be able to pull it together and show up. And boy, did he prop up Mike Evans last season. Mike Evans finished with only 79 catches. However, he turned him in to 1,250 yards and 13 scores. 13 scores, tied Tyreek Hill with 13 scores on only 136 targets. Tyreek Hill had 35 more targets, same amount of touchdowns. Heck of a year for Mike Evans last year. Really showed that he is Mr. Consistency. Was it every season he's been in the league now? 10 seasons, 1,000+ yards. He's just fantastic. 12 touchdowns for the 5th time in his career. Finishes, he ranked 15th in yards per route run, 17th in first read share, 19th in first yards per route run. So, do you think he finishes as a wide receiver 2 this year?
Sure. Dude, he gets 1,000 yards every year. It's just like a safety play at this point, right? Just put him around the 12 spot. Because he's going to get 1,000 yards.
Hashtag analysis.
It doesn't have to be complicated, right? 15th most targets, 18th most catches. He had the 13 touchdowns, tied for first, 9th in yards in 12.55. Dude gets 1,000 yards every year, whether they force feed him the last week of the season 2 years ago or not. So for me, this is more of the value, right? I have him in the top 10. You have him just outside. He's going pick 30, so it's the middle of round 3. Finally, you can take a breath and get a number 1 wide receiver. Baker kind of proved himself, and you can just kind of relax and take a wide receiver who's going to have over 1,000 yards. He's probably going to have, 7 or more touchdowns. And it's just a safe pick. That's all it is. He was top 5 last year. He's getting older, but he's not as old as some others. And so just take the 1,000 yards. Just do it.
There you go. All right.
I mean, do you want me to say? Do you want me to say anything else? There's not much else to say about Mike Evans.
No, it's not rocket surgery. It's not rocket surgery here. It's not brain science. It's okay. We are moving on. Next up, consensus, wide receiver 10. We have Deebo Samuel. Feels a little low for Deebo, personally, but it could be on the rise. Brandon Ayuk is holding out. They are evidently, the 49ers are exploring trades. If Ayuk goes, I think Deebo, for us, he could tickle the top 5. Last year, finishes wide receiver 11. Had 60 catches, shave under 900 yards, and 7 scores. Missed several games due to injury. But, man, is Deebo Samuel nice when he's healthy.
He is. He also adds the rushing aspect of the game. So it's hard to even rattle off what he does.
He's the offensive weapon.
Yeah, hey, if you were to run down his targets and his yards and all this stuff, Like he missed 2 games last year. That's not that bad, but like he averaged the 8th most points per game last year at the wide receiver position because he gets rushing yards, he gets rushing touchdowns, even with Christian McCaffrey. If Christian McCaffrey got hurt, Deebo Samuel would step up. If Brandon Ayuk gets traded, Deebo Samuel will step up. Probably at least one of those 2 things are going to happen. Deebo's still only going into his 28-year-old year? Whatever. Not a language.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, I mean, you were saying brain scientists and rocket surgery earlier, and it like really threw me off, and I'm still recovering because I wanted to say something, but I didn't know what to say.
Rocket science and brain surgery. You see,
yeah,
there you go.
It just made me so angry that you did that. It really flustered me.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks. So, like, Deebo Samuel's only had over 1,000 yards receiving one time in his career, and yet he's been like a top 5 wide receiver previously. So, like, there's more than just stats here. You trust Shanahan, you trust the offense, you trust the process, and he'll get you. Like, it might not always be pretty, but he'll get you there. So, as Jason mentioned, wide receiver 11 last year. He's going 1 pick after Mike Evans. Again, more value.
Oh, that is tantalizing.
Middle around 3. I think you can flip a coin between the 2 of them. They're neck and neck, and they're being drafted as such.
Deebo's the better side of that coin, for sure. Okay. Anything else on Deebo?
There's definitely more upside on Deebo than there is on Mike Evans.
Yes, there is. All right. Our next wide receiver, consensus wide receiver 11, the rookie. Everyone has been wondering, when are we going to talk about Marvin Harrison? Well, here is the rookie. Marvin Harrison Jr., the absolute freaking stud. Stud.
Jason, before I let you get into Marvin Harrison Jr., the only notes that I wrote down about him, and then I'll just let you pontificate. I drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. when I started playing fantasy football in 2005. That was 19 years ago. I feel old. That's my analysis.
Okay. Well, just look around at who else is there. There's no one. I mean, Greg Dortch, Michael Wilson.
Don't you dare disparage the great name of Greg Dortch, the Human Torch.
But like, I mean, if Harrison Jr. can even like muster 25% target share, he would be tied for 13th in raw target volume among wide receivers last year. Arizona threw the ball more than 550 times. Like
Who was that? Colt McCoy? Who was that at the beginning of the season? It wasn't Red Skelton.
Saying, like,
that was 2010.
All they did was chuck the rock. There's nobody at their wide receiver position to remotely even push for targets. And like, yeah, Trey McBride's there. Cool, he's a tight end. Like, I'm just saying, like, it's just going to be so much freaking volume. It's going to be outrageous. So,
yeah, and I mean, he's been the second coming for a long time when it comes to wide receivers. I mean, he's been the top wide receiver for a couple of years in college. I forgot Joshua Dobbs was lighting up the world before he got traded to Minnesota. They also started Clayton Tune for a week, whoever that is.
6'4", 205, Ohio State. Just absolutely incredible. I probably should have won the Bolitnikoff Award over Jalen Hyatt. 77 catches, almost 1,300 yards, and 14 touchdowns. Did win it last year. 1,200 more yards and 14 more touchdowns. Just absolutely insane. So I am all in on Marvin Harrison Jr. He is going to be incredible And he's my wide receiver 9. I have him, full disclosure, I have him ahead of both Mike Evans and Deebo. And he's going to crush because the Cardinals are not good. Kyler is fully healthy, finally. And they're going to toss the rock a lot because they're going to be behind a lot. So get Marvin Harrison Jr., please. His what's his current sleeper round? He's going in the second, so he's being drafted ahead of both Deebo and Mike Evans right now. That tracks for me. He's going pick 16, so middle of the second.
Yeah, keep in mind, just for like a rookie comp, right? Jamar Chase coming out of LSU, highly touted. He had 81 catches, 1,455 yards, 13 touchdowns as a rookie. That happens to be his best. Happens to be his best season, Jamar Chase. But not saying you should expect that after out of Marvin Harrison.
It's like any.
If you do expect that out of Marvin Harrison, you should be taking him in round 1.
I was like, it's the best rookie year for any receiver ever.
I'm not saying it wasn't, but all things considered, like if you're high on him and you're in round 2, you could do worse than Marvin Harrison Jr.
All right, and next up, you could draft this guy. Next up, our wide receiver 12, Davante Adams. I mean, last year, finished as wide receiver 12. Run it back. You got Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. You lose Josh Jacobs, the bell cow running back that actually moved the chains. But you do have Zamir White, who's a guy. And you got Brock Bowers now competing for catches. I mean, is there anything to be like thrilled about for Davante? He's a year older. He had 100 catches, 1,100 yards last year. I mean, he's there on volume alone. He's not. I'm not excited, if you couldn't tell.
I'm not really excited either. This is more of like. So, full disclosure, people we left out here that are currently going around to Chris Olave, Drake London, Brandon Ayuk. I mean, Davante, this is more of like a targets type conversation, right?
33% target share, 175 targets. Like, you are literally just going for volume here. There's not going to be a ton of touchdowns. He's not going to have a stray 13 touchdown year.
No, because their offense isn't good enough, and so like you take.
Well, and they'll just bracket him in the red zone, and Aiden O'Connell's not going to dime him up anyway.
Fair. So like you take Brees or Bijan or you wouldn't take Gibbs that early, but basically if you went running back in round 1, you're coming back around, all these other wide receivers are gone, and you're like, well, I can get a guy that had the second most targets in football last year. I guess I'll take Davante Adams. Like, I guess you could do worse than that. I guess one of the problems that I have, and I guess I didn't really realize this, and it probably spoils what I'm going to ask Jason here. Do you know how old Davante Adams is?
I know he's probably not young.
Yeah, so he's going to be 30. He's going to be 32 in December.
I was going to say 30.
Yeah, it's a little older than I think, because I was going to say I thought he was 30 as well. So he's been around a while. Who's older, Mike Evans or Davante Adams?
Jesus, Evans been in the league for damn near 10 years. Davante? Barely? Or the same age?
Yeah, I mean, so Mike Evans, I believe, just turned 30. Or he's going to turn 30. Sorry, I think Mike Evans turns 31 during the season or in a couple of weeks. So Davante Adams is like a year older than him.
Oof.
And Mike Evans has been around for a long ass time. And so we're kind of getting to the point where Davante Adams is going to get into like Hopkins territory. Like he's like DeAndre Hopkins has been around for a while, and you're like, he's been around. Like, he's 32. is DeAndre Hopkins. Devontae Adams is going to be 32. So, like, you're kind of talking about the same guy from a year ago that DeAndre Hopkins was, and I know he was kind of banged up a little bit, but, like, I think there's pause for concern here, but it's just, like, they don't have anybody else, and, like, wide receivers can age gracefully, and I think Devontae Adams will. But, like, there are weeks last year, and I'll cherry pick here a little bit. Week 6 against New England, 2 for 29. Week 8 at Detroit, 1 for 11. Week 9 against the Giants, 4 for 34. Week 16, you're in the playoffs, you're in the semifinals, puts up 1 for 4 against Kansas City, and they won that game. Like, like there are some rough weeks in there.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, and we got somebody that's like right on the outside of this too with Michael Pittman. Like, there's some younger guys that are going to be drafted right around him. Pittman, Drake London, Olave. Like, we haven't talked about any of those guys. Waddle, Ayuk, Nico.
Yeah. Like, yeah, so, like, I feel like Devontae is a stay away for me this year. Like, even if you, like just take somebody younger. Like, it's just an age factor.
There's something like 7 years, yeah. It's definitely something to think about. That plus the crappy quarterback play that you know you're going to get. I mean,
right. So Fantasy Pros has him at 10. We have him at 12. I would not be surprised that when we kind of finalize these rankings, depending on if Ayuk gets traded and like we kind of, well, it's really more me talk myself more into Drake London. Jason has him ranked at 13. Like Pittman, Ayuk. Like Olave kind of sucked to root for last year because I don't like Derek Carr, but I don't really like the Raiders quarterbacks either. So it's kind of rough. So like you get like, you know, we started out, we were high on the first like 4, 5, 6 guys. They're all going, you know, round 1, middle of round 1 or earlier. And then like starting with like Puka is hurt. Garrett Wilson, you have question at quarterback. Mike Evans is kind of old. Deebo, like, gets you the points, but it's not super pretty. Marvin Harrison's young, so all right, like, I'm gonna ride with the rookie. Devontae Adams is old. Olave, like, it just isn't really inspiring when you get to end of round 2, round 3, round 4. And we'll talk about this eventually. Maybe there's a little more interesting players in round 4, 5, 6 than there is in round 3. But, like, it kind of feels like you're forcing some of these guys a little earlier than you want to take them.
Yeah, I hope you eventually see my way on the whole Drake London thing. The way I kind of look at it is the guy is a specimen. Yeah, Kyle Pitts is there too and Bijan. But, like, those guys are going to help create offense and first downs. But, like, that team has not had a quarterback in years. Kirk Cousins just propped up the number 1 wide receiver in football for like the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, no, you're right.
You don't think he can prop up like a high-end wide receiver 2 in Drake London? If not, like it's like the throws are going to be there. If Drake's open, Kirk's going to get the ball to him. And I think Drake can get open.
It's something I'm going to have to think long and hard about. And I think that's the enjoyable part about this podcast for me is like getting to kind of pick your brain and we look at each other's rankings and kind of, well, maybe I'm too low or you're too high or we adjust up and down. Like Drake London's never proved it and neither is Pitts.
No.
And like, hey, are they going to feature like Bijan so much and even give the ball to, Tyler Algier and like, is there like Kirk Cousins tore his Achilles last year? Like, do we know how healthy he's going to be or be able to stay healthy? And he's playing on AstroTurf.
Yeah, so did Aaron.
No, right, exactly.
So did Aaron. Last year, the Falcons had Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke throwing the ball.
Heineke? Yeah, not great. London, 110 targets, 69 nice catches, 900 yards, 2 touchdowns. He averaged 8.7 points a game. Like
20 2022 was Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder. Like, just dog shit at quarterback.
Yeah.
And then you had the ghost of Matt Ryan in 2021. So, like, I don't know. Kind of feel bad for Pitts in London and what they've had to deal with.
Yeah, London had 3 games with with double-digit targets. Just rough. I mean,
it's not even just the targets, though. It's like the quality of the targets. Like, like Desmond Ridder throwing it 10 yards into the dirt in front of you, or into the dirt 10 yards in front of you. Like, is that a target? I don't know.
Yeah, in our league of record, he was drafted in the 5th round last year, was Drake London.
That feels bad.
And he started week 1 with 1 target and 0 catches. So,
boy. That sucks.
I know that's not indicative of what's to come this year, but it's one of those things where I feel like the fact that Drake London's being drafted currently pick 17 or 18, it's just like, what are we doing here, guys? Like,
dude, the difference a quarterback makes. Honestly, though, I'm not even hating on it. Even hating on it. Are there any other fringe dudes you want to talk about? How come there's no Texan wide receiver up as a wide receiver 1? Huh? What happened to Nico? He was wide receiver 9 last year. You don't love Nico?
I love Nico.
Yeah? Why do you have him ranked at 18 if you love him so much?
I do think the additions of Joe Mixon, where they did not have a running game at all last year, and Stephon Diggs, just hurts everybody. Like, I feel like they're going to be a better real life team than they will be a fantasy team, because you're not going to get consistent numbers for where they're being drafted. You're going to get flashes, or some guy will get hot a week, or like, I mean, Nico just got paid too. Like, it would not surprise me to, like, Diggs is featured 1 week. Nico complains to the media. Nico's featured 1 week. Diggs complains to the media. Diggs gets featured 1 week. Tank Dell's like, hey, what the hell? Stop running me up the middle on a draw play. Like, there's going to be and then Joe Mixon's going to be like, dude, hey, I'm only 28. Like, what the hell? Give me the ball when you get to the goal line. Stop throwing it to Diggs.
Yeah, somebody's going to be upset, man. Tank Dell was crushing it before he got hurt.
Yeah, he's electric.
He's not. Admittedly, he's not very good at run blocking on the goal line. But like, other than that, by the way, that's what he did. That's what they had him do when he tore his shit last year.
Tell me your weakness. Well, here,
being 5'8" and run blocking a 400-pound man on the goal line.
Yeah, let me show you. So, yeah, no, the Texans thing is, I would just prefer to have Stroud and enjoy the riches from it. I think picking a wide receiver is a tougher ask. And, hey, like, if you listen to this podcast last year, we had Nico. It was like, hey, we're going to overdraft him in like the 30s because he's going in the 40s. He delivered a wide receiver 9 season. I just have a hard time believing he's going to replicate a wide receiver 9 season. He's going pick 28, so early to middle of round 3. It just feels early to me.
Yeah, yes, it does.
But facts don't care about your feelings. So
does ending this podcast. It feels a little early, but alas. It's been about an hour. We've torn apart all of these wonderful receivers and several more bonus players. Keep your eyes peeled as we probably will issue an updated podcast of this. Kind of same deal, maybe towards the end of the month, beginning of September, once, camp kind of concludes and people have to make roster cuts and injuries and things kind of work themselves out. So hopefully, Ayuk is one of the pieces, and CeeDee Lamb's contract gets sorted out to help everyone understand exactly what the first couple weeks of the season are going to look like. And
more than anything,
we'll figure it out.
It's like, please quarterbacks stay healthy, wide receivers please stay healthy. There were so many quarterback injuries last year that hampered all of these dudes. There's only a couple quarterbacks that started, I would say 90% of their games. So, hey, you want to figure out who that's going to be. A lot of it's luck based. You can only do so much, but hopefully go over to take a download. I feel like that was a quick hour, Jason.
It was a quick hour, and yes, I completely echo what you said. With about a dozen backup quarterbacks playing last year, never want to see that again. So that's why I question Aaron and Tyrod supporting Mr. Garrett Wilson.
It can't possibly be worse than what it was last year.
Nothing could be worse. All right, that does it for us. Thank you guys so much. Have a good night.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Fantasy Football Sackos podcast. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter @the FF Sackos.